So Roads to Power, as we all know, is my favorite DLC for Crusader Kings 3 to date, and I think that the game is heading in a very positive direction going forward. However, there are still some features from its predecessor that I would personally like to see included in Crusader Kings 3, and without any further ado, let's just talk about those. So the first one I would like to see would be Request Crusades. Now this is a feature from CK2 that was added with the Sons of Abraham DLC, and essentially it is like it sounds. You could request Crusades from your Pope or from your Holy Leader. I believe you could also request Jihads as well. It would make sense for highly religious characters or people who maybe just had a lot of money or they were friends with the Pope or whoever their religious leader happens to be able to request a crusade. Maybe they want to manipulate the Pope and tell them that there's some sort of heretics in this other region that you want to, establish like an heir there or something. It would just be cool. It would allow a little more, I don't know, creativity with the system rather than it just feeling really randomized like it does now. Like every once in a while, after the main crusades are over, if the Kingdom of Jerusalem is there, they'll just go on crusades against like anybody, and it makes no sense. So I would like to see this kind of brought back as a way to maybe redirect or take control of it again. The second one is the College of Cardinals, and this is also from that same DLC, the Sons of Abraham. And this one specifically I would love to see because I feel like administrative government reminded me a lot of that. In fact, there's the next one after this is also because of that. The papal succession was a cool feature because you could essentially manipulate who would become Pope. Like you could get family members who you made into monks or made into whatever missionaries, and then put them in the line of cardinals and then sort of manipulate their way up into Pope. So you'd have like your brother or your nephew or something and they would be the Pope, which is crazy to think about because again, with the Request Crusades or like whatever, with the other stuff you can ask like claims, if they're your sibling, they're way more likely to give that to you. So it's like another way for you to sort of like intrigue, manipulate your way throughout the government. And it's not like that didn't happen historically. People would befriend popes or they would become enemies of popes and they would feel their ire or feel their blessing, vice versa. So I think being able to manipulate this system would go a long way to, I guess, making it feel a little more dynamic because as it stands, the Pope doesn't really feel that important. Maybe giving more papal power, that's not necessarily in CK2, but like revamping the Pope system, the religious head system in general would be cool, but I would love to see the College of Cardinals brought back. So they mentioned this with admin governments, but number 3, I'd actually like to see viceroyalty brought back to feudal governments, and it's a lot like administrative government where you can essentially just assign kingdoms or whatever below you as a feudal emperor to viceroyals, which is essentially the title basically works that when you give it to them, it goes back towards you after they die. Like if they were to die, it goes back to the empire rather than going to their family members. It's really interesting. I like this idea of giving feudal empires their own flavor outside of that because like I said in my review for Roads to Power, I feel like admin has way more going for it now than feudal does. So maybe adding something like viceroyalty will make the system feel a little more, again, dynamic. I'm trying to think of ways to make the game a little more dynamic, and I think being able to assign titles that you don't have to give up, even if it was to your own family members, would be pretty sweet. So this next one is a huge one, and I think with Landless Adventurers, this is like a no-brainer in my opinion, and that's societies. And so that's joinable cults, joinable monasteries, the assassins, joinable holy orders, warrior lodges. It was warrior lodges in CK2, but I think you could add holy orders to CK3. And basically these are just orders that you can join. As you can see on screen, I've just shown a couple examples like cults, religious orders, whatever, that you could rank up in secretly or in public, and you would get various benefits from them. I think that makes a ridiculous amount of sense for the Landless Adventurer system. I would almost be shocked if they didn't do this going forward, just because it would flesh out the system so much more. I would just really, really, really love to see it because I think the RPG mechanics of CK3 would already benefit from this to a ridiculous amount. Like you could even just play as like a monk within a monastic order as a single player and not have to have a camp or anything. I have seen grumbles of people saying that they don't really want to be a party. So you could technically do that through the system and then maybe like acquire sainthood because that's now in the game, or like immortality is now in the game. Like you could do all sorts of things with this that I think people would really like. Or you could maybe, again, I'm going to go the religious route. You could maybe become a member of the Inquisition or something, and you can like hunt heretics or hunt apostates. I know that's a little early in the timeline. That wasn't until, later, like high Middle Ages, early modern period. But still, it's something that could be fun that I think would expand the Landless Adventurer system a lot and would give people even more to sink their teeth into. Again, I'd be really, really surprised if this didn't get added anyway, but it's something that I feel like is very, very deeply missed. So next up we have Coronations, and this one I think will come too, because in the admin government system that we have right now, you sort of have a coronation where you get, you become the emperor, you get like a little screen, a little pop-up, whatever. I just think an event where you become coronated when you take the throne, or like what happened historically a lot of the time, a king who was old would crown their heir as the co-king, which has been added to the game, but I think having an actual ceremony that maybe you have to pay a little prestige for or whatever to formally recognize them as that role would be really cool. It would just add a little more to the, I guess, the feeling of a feudal government, give feudal governments a little bit more to look forward to. Like when you have a new ruler, maybe you can throw a feast after the coronation, like you get like a bonus, you can throw like a feast or a tournament or whatever for maybe a reduced cost or something. That could be cool. But I think this is something that needs to be in the game, considering how often throughout history a coronation was basically seen as the sign of their authority. So the fact that we don't have them already is kind of strange. And the fact that you can't like self-coronate yourself, you're like, oh, I've become the emperor, I'm gonna do this myself. And people will be like, can you do that? It'd just be an interesting thing to have in the game, like if you wanted to play like a crazy person who's saying they're an emperor even though they're like a duke or something. The next one's going to come as no surprise. This is the Merchant Republics. This one's going to be short because I've talked about this a lot. Admin government basically opened the door for this to be a thing. They are very similar, and the only thing they're really missing is the next thing that I would ask for, and that's trade. So technically this is going to be like a 2-for-1. So trade and Merchant Republics are two things that I would love to see. I think being able to play as Venice properly, or any of the Italian republics that existed throughout this period, because there's a few of them, would be just absolutely necessary. We have the 4th Crusade in the game now that happens randomly. Venice was a huge part of that, and then maybe you could even use Venice as like a catalyst for it. And you know what? I'm going to redact here. I'm going to go back a little bit. I think being able to request Crusades could be a good feature for the 4th Crusade, or for future Crusades like that for the Latin, rulers, because they could be like, oh, okay, I'm a Merchant Republic, but I want to call a crusade against Byzantium. That could be a cool thing for that as well, now that I'm thinking about it. Even if you're not in Venice, Muslim rulers were also able to become trade republics, which was huge. And I think it would be such a great system to play tall with the admin, like the admin estate. You wouldn't even really have to change it. Maybe you have like a port that you can upgrade on the estate, because I feel like that would make sense. Or like maybe you have a city instead of just an estate, and instead of monitoring like various governors, you're monitoring like various families, which could be really cool. So Nomads is the next one, and this one actually kind of plays into trade too, because the Horse Lords DLC, which I've not been talking about which DLCs these were from for a minute because I forgot. The Horse Lords DLC added Nomad as a government, which is, I think, a no-brainer. Again, this is probably going to come. But it also added a Silk Road overhaul, which I think is really big. It gave like trade posts, it gave trade zones, it gave commercial value as features to the game, which are really huge. And I think being able even just to establish your own trade routes maybe could be a cool feature. Like when you have a ruler and they're like, let's discuss a trade agreement. You're establishing a trade route, and now you have to maybe develop the trade route. So maybe your steward and their steward have to work together, and it's like a dual thing. And maybe if you balance your own stewardship as a ruler against theirs, they could the effectiveness of the trade route could increase or decrease. You know what I mean? Well, with Nomads, we have Genghis Khan in the game now. He was already in the game before, but now he's an even bigger character. And with conquerors and stuff coming out of the steppe or wherever, I think Nomads would just be a cool feature. Thinking about like the Scythians, the Huns, the Mongols, it's just something that I think a lot of people gravitate to, and the fact that it's not already in the game is weird, but not that weird because we've been slowly getting new government types, so I can only assume that either Nomads or Merchant Republics will be added next, now that Genghis Khan is such a huge part of the later start date, or I guess what would be probably the latest start date, and then when it dissolves into the various other kingdoms, I think it would just make sense. So the next one is actually going to be the entirety of an old DLC, and that's the Rajas of India. I think this DLC in particular is really missed, especially when you look at, and Jade Dragon too. We'll say Jade Dragon, Rajas of India. We'll add both of them. I think these two DLCs are a must, because the flavor of Asia and even Africa needs one too, but Asia, Africa, they both have not a whole lot going on. So if you have stuff for India, if you have stuff for, the Chinese area, and then if you have stuff for Africa beyond North Africa, I think it would go a long way to giving a lot more incentive to play outside of Europe. You've already done that with Legacy of Persia and now Roads to Power a little further east. So now the Balkans, Mesopotamia regions are a lot more fun to play. I think that they're probably the best areas to play right now. And with the way the DLC format is going and how well you guys have been doing over at Paradox, I feel like I'm talking to you directly, so that's what I'm going to do. I think that you'll only do a great job with them anyway. So I would say focus on Rajas, focus on Asia, focus on Africa, do those things. and I think people would be happy. I know I would be happy personally. I don't speak for everybody, but that's just me. So this last one is definitely going to be maybe controversial to a few people, but I think we should have Glitterhoof and the other animal counselors back. I just love the absurdity of this character, especially Glitterhoof, who was a character that if you were, I think, an insane ruler, you could get an event where you could choose a horse as a counselor, sort of like they say, what was it, like Caligula did. But you could have Glitterhoof essentially be a counselor, like a character, and you could romance them. Glitterhoof could become immortal. You could play as Glitterhoof. It was insane. And there was also, I think, Oron and Mittens. Oron, I think, is a bear. Mittens is a cat, and you could have them as counselors too. Plus, we've gotten word that they're doing more in-depth character models for animals for Crusader Kings 3. We've already got horses in the barbershop. I think it only makes sense that we would have Glitterhoof come back, because I would personally, I would love to see people making videos about making an immortal, because now immortality is in the game, an immortal nomadic horse god who's rolling across the steppe, taking over Constantinople. I just think that would be the craziest thing ever. I would love to see it, and I think that people would enjoy it. They'd have a lot of fun, and ultimately that's what this game is about. I know Crusader Kings 3 was trying not to be so absurd, but let's lean into the absurd a little bit. Bring Glitterhoof back. Glitterhoof when? The ball is in your court. This is the only one I actually want. All the other ones were a ruse to get to this moment, and I want Glitterhoof now. But that is going to be it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate you very much. What do you think? What are some features from the old game that you wish to see back in Crusader Kings 3? Let me know in a comment below. And as always, thank you to my Paladin ranked members. Those are Dwayne the Rock Lobster, Valadar, Dunyal, and Zora Luigi. You guys are the best. As always, I'm Soul, and I will happily see you in the next one.